The Invisible Housekeeper, a child and the word that changed everything. There are people who just want to come home with a little dignity. People who get up early, face crowded buses, listen to orders all day long, and still smile. This story is for anyone who's tired of feeling invisible. Take a deep breath with me. There's something in this silence that might heal what you never knew how to explain. Her name was Joanna, but nobody called her that. She was the cleaning lady, the maid. She entered through the back door, ate in silence, left without being noticed. And that was fine. It was her job. But over time it started hurting in places she couldn't name. It felt like, along with the dust, she was sweeping away her own existence. Have you ever felt that way? Like people don't even remember your name? Write it in the comments. There's someone out there who will understand you. Joanna cleaned everything. Windows, floors, cabinets. But on the inside, she lived covered in the dust of silence. No one asked if she was okay. No one said thank you. Well, one day, she tripped on a chair. Her boss didn't even look at her. She just said, "Watch out for the furniture, Joanna." That was when Joanna realized they didn't see her as a person. She was just a function. If that struck a chord with you, take a deep breath. Sometimes the pain you feel has a name, and that name is unimportance. If you've ever been treated like a burden, leave a like, just to say, I know that feeling too. But then, one day, while she was dusting the bookshelf, she heard a small voice behind her. It was the boss's daughter, about 5 years old. The little girl came closer, watched her for a while and quietly said, "You smell nice." Joanna froze. Nobody had said anything to her in years, but that child noticed, felt it, named it, and it broke open an ancient silence in Joanna's chest. If that part made you breathe differently, share this video with someone who might need to be seen. The next day, Joanna wore the lipstick she'd put away long ago, not because she wanted to please anyone, but because, for the first time in a long time, she remembered that there was still a person there, and she started paying more attention to herself. A pair of earrings, a calm cup of coffee, a little self-compliment. The work went on, the routine too. But now, she wasn't just a function, she was a presence. If you know someone who deserves to be remembered as a person, and not just a service, share this video with care. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe here. Every week we share real stories like this, about ordinary people, living pains no one sees, and finding strength in details almost no one notices. And tell me here in the comments, when was the last time someone truly saw you? Joanna was 42 when she started working for the Mendonça family. A high middle-class family, the kind you see in margarine commercials. The husband was an executive at some multinational company. The wife owned a home decor store at the mall. And little Sophia, the 5-year-old girl who would change everything. At the job interview, Mrs. Mendonça was blunt. "We need someone discreet, efficient, and who won't give us any trouble." Joanna just nodded. She knew that kind of talk well. It was her 5th house as a day labor cleaner in 12 years of work. Before that, she'd been a nanny, a bakery attendant, and a kitchen helper. Jobs where people rarely looked her in the eye. "I'll show you around the house. You start tomorrow at 7 a.m. You leave at 5 p.m. Lunch is at 1 p.m. You can bring your own food or eat our leftovers, whichever you prefer." Joanna chose to bring her own lunch. Experience had taught her that leftovers didn't always mean a decent meal. Sometimes They really were just the scraps nobody wanted, and she'd already swallowed too many scraps in her life. On her first day, Joanna arrived at 6:45. She waited at the gate until exactly 7. She didn't want to start even a minute late. When Mrs. Mendonça opened the door, she barely greeted Joanna, handing her a list of tasks, showing her where the cleaning products were, then rushing out, shouting instructions to her daughter who was still having breakfast. "Sophia, don't forget your lunchbox and behave today, okay? No tantrums like yesterday." The little girl bowed her head, embarrassed. Her eyes met Joanna's for a brief moment, a look that said, "I know what it's like to be scolded like that too." That first week, Joanna learned the household routine. She understood she should start by cleaning Mr. Mendonça's office, then the bedrooms, leaving the kitchen and living room for last. She learned not to make noise when Mr. Mendonça worked from home. She learned that Sophia liked to hide under the table when her mother argued on the phone. She learned that Mrs. Mendonça preferred her to use the service entrance, even if it was raining and the path was muddy. Above all, she learned to be transparent. Weeks turned into months, and Joanna's transparency became almost perfect. She moved like a ghost through the Mendonça home, cleaned without being seen, tidied up without being noticed, breathed without making a sound. Sometimes, when Sophia played alone in the living room, Joanna would give her a discreet smile, a small act of rebellion against her own invisibility. One Thursday morning, Joanna was polishing the mirrors in the hallway when she heard an argument. Mr. and Mrs. Mendonça were arguing in the bedroom, something about money, about the store not getting the expected returns, about a cancelled trip. Joanna moved even more quietly, trying to be less than a shadow. She knew couples hated being watched during fights. "You don't understand. It's not just the store, it's everything. This house, this life. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating," yelled Mrs. Mendonça. "Oh, please, look around you. You have everything. A beautiful house, a healthy daughter, a maid who does everything for you. What more do you want?" Joanna felt a pang in her chest. A maid. That was how she existed in that house. Not as Joanna, not as a person, as a function, as a tool, as an extension of the vacuum cleaner or the mop. Something useful, necessary, but without a story of its own. That night, back in her small apartment in the suburbs, Joanna cried. A silent cry, the kind she'd learned since childhood. She cried as she looked at her calloused hands, at her short nails worn down by cleaning products. Hands that had raised her son alone after her husband left without explanation. Hands that had cradled her son during nights of fever. Hands that now wrote letters to that same son, who lived with his grandmother in the countryside because she couldn't take care of him while she worked. "Dear Mateus," she wrote that night, "how was your day at school? Things are fine here. The lady of the house where I work said I'm a maid who does everything." I think she meant it as a compliment. Joanna stopped writing, looked at the letter, then tore it up. She didn't want her son to know how belittled she felt. She started another letter, more cheerful, talking about a TV show she'd watched, about how she was saving money to visit him during vacation, about how proud she was of him. The following week, everything was back to the usual routine. Joanna arrived promptly at 7, entered through the back door, cleaned, tidied up, ate lunch alone in the small service area, cleaned some more, left at 5, almost always without having said more than the necessary few words to her employers. But on Wednesday of that week, things changed. Sophia had a fever and didn't go to school. Mrs. Mendonça had an important meeting at the store and couldn't miss it. Mr. Mendonça was out of town. The regular nanny couldn't come. "Joanna," said Mrs. Mendonça, with that tone of someone asking a favor but really giving an order, "could you keep an eye on Sophia today? She has a slight fever. I already gave her medicine. Just make sure she drinks water and rests. You can clean her room another day." Joanna nodded. She'd taken care of sick children before. Her own son had been asthmatic as a little boy. When Mrs. Mendonça left, Sophia was lying on the living room couch, watching cartoons on TV. Joanna continued her work, but now passed through the living room often to check on her. From time to time, she asked if Sophia wanted water or if she was feeling okay. Around 11 a.m., Sophia turned off the TV and watched Joanna cleaning the windows in the living room. "Why do you clean everything every day? Don't things stay clean?" Joanna smiled. It was the first genuine question anyone in that house had asked her in months. "They do get clean, yes, but every day they get dirty again. It's like brushing your teeth. You brush them today, but tomorrow you have to brush them again." Sophia seemed to think seriously about the answer. After a moment, she asked, "Do you like cleaning?" The question caught Joanna by surprise. No one had ever asked if she liked what she did. It was simply what she did, what she'd always done. "Sometimes," she answered truthfully. "I like it when I'm done and everything looks neat and shiny. It feels good, like when I put my toys away and Mommy gets happy. Kind of like that, yeah." Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching Joanna work. Then she said, with the brutal honesty only children have, "Mommy never says thank you to you. I see it." Joanna felt her heart tighten. She tried to hide it by continuing to clean. "It's okay, it's my job. But my teacher says we should always say thank you when someone does something for us." Joanna smiled again. "Your teacher's right. It's good to be grateful." Sophia stood up from the couch and came over to Joanna. She looked at her closely with that childlike curiosity that doesn't yet know how to be discreet. "Do you wear perfume?" "Yes, a little. It's nice. You smell good." Those 3 words. You smell good. So simple, so small, but it was as if someone had opened a window in a dark room. Joanna felt something warm in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The feeling of being seen, of being noticed as a person, not just a function. "Thank you, Sophia," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The girl smiled, pleased with herself, and went back to the couch. The rest of the day went by with Sophia following Joanna around the house, asking questions about cleaning products, about where Joanna lived, if she had children, if she liked chocolate ice cream. Simple questions, but they recognized Joanna's existence beyond housework. When Mrs. Mendonça got home, she found Sophia asleep on the couch and the house impeccably clean, as usual. "How was her day?" she asked, without really looking at Joanna. "Fine. The fever went down. She ate some soup for lunch and drank plenty of water." "Great. Thank you, Joanna." It was the first time Mrs. Mendonça had thanked her, probably because Joanna had done something beyond her usual duties. Even so, it felt strange, more like a dismissal than a real thank you. That night at home, Joanna didn't cry. Instead, she looked at her small wardrobe. In the back, there was a little box with some cheap makeup she hardly ever wore. Among them was a red lipstick she'd bought years ago, in a moment of boldness that was soon smothered by routine. "You smell good." Sophia's words echoed in her mind. It wasn't a fancy compliment. It wasn't even a compliment about her work. It was simply acknowledging something human about her, something beyond the job of cleaning and organizing. Joanna picked up the lipstick and held it for a moment. Then, determined, she opened it and put it on. The red was too bright for someone who had spent years trying to be invisible. But maybe, she thought, it was time to be a bit more visible. The next morning, Joanna arrived at the Mendonca's house with lipstick on. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It wasn't a provocation. It was just a woman remembering that she was, above all else, a woman. Not just a pair of hands that scrubbed floors. Mrs. Mendonca noticed. Joanna saw a brief flash of surprise in her eyes, maybe even discomfort, but she said nothing. Sophia, on the other hand, was delighted. "Your lips are red. You look like a princess." Joanna smiled, thankful for the innocence of childhood. "Thank you, Sophia. I'm not a princess, just an ordinary woman who decided to wear lipstick today. When I grow up, I want to wear it too." Mrs. Mendonca cut in, using that motherly tone that ends a conversation. "Sophia, finish your breakfast. You're going to be late for school." The day continued as usual. Joanna cleaned, organized, ate lunch alone. But something was different. She was different. Every time she passed by a mirror or a window and saw her reflection with red lips, she remembered, "I'm more than a function. I'm Joanna." In the days that followed, other small changes happened. Joanna started wearing discreet earrings. She began bringing books to read during her short lunch break. Books she'd gotten years before from her son's teacher, but never had the time or energy to open. Her bond with Sophia kept growing. The little girl now ran to show Joanna her drawings, to tell her stories from school, to ask her which dress would look best on her doll. Mrs. Mendonca watched this closeness with a mix of confusion and discomfort. It seemed to break the natural order of things in her eyes. House cleaners weren't supposed to befriend the children. They were just supposed to clean, organize, and leave. One Friday, as Joanna was about to leave, Mrs. Mendonca asked to speak with her. "Joanna, I've noticed you've been different lately." "Different how, Mom?" "More present. Sophia talks about you a lot. Yesterday she said she wants to smell nice like Joanna when she grows up." Joanna didn't know what to say. Was she being scolded for existing more visibly, for wearing lipstick, but talking to a child who clearly needed some attention? "Sorry if I did something wrong," she finally said. Mrs. Mendonca sighed. "It's not that. It's just Sophia is influenced by everything around her. You understand?" Joanna understood perfectly. The message was clear. You are the maid. Not a role model, not an influence, not someone my daughter should notice or value. "I understand, Ma'am. I'll keep my distance." When she said that, Joanna felt something break inside her. Something that had started to bloom since that simple, "You smell nice." The sense that she had value beyond her tasks. That weekend, Joanna thought a lot about that conversation. She thought about stopping the lipstick, going back to being invisible, accepting that her place in that house was to clean without being seen, to exist without being noticed. But then she remembered her son, how she struggled to give him a better life, how she wanted him to be proud of her, and she realized she couldn't teach him about dignity if she herself didn't live with dignity. On Monday, Joanna arrived at the Mendonca's house wearing her red lipstick, earrings, and a book in her bag. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-preservation. Mrs. Mendonca noticed, but didn't say anything. Sophia ran to hug Joanna the moment she saw her, ignoring the disapproving look from her mother. "Joanna, I made a drawing for you over the weekend." It was a simple drawing. 2 stick figures, one big and one small, both with bright red smiles on their faces. At the top, in crooked, colorful letters, it said, "Me, and Joanna. "That's beautiful, Sophia. Thank you," Joanna said, carefully putting the drawing in her bag. "I'm going to put it on my fridge at home." The girl smiled proudly and ran back to finish her breakfast. Mrs. Mendonça looked at Joanna with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't anger or disapproval. It was something more complicated, like recognition mixed with discomfort. That week, something unusual happened. Mr. Mendonça stayed home the entire day, working in his office. Normally, Joanna avoided that part of the house as much as possible, cleaning in absolute silence when she needed to go in there. But that day, while she was vacuuming the hallway near the office, Mr. Mendonça stepped out to get coffee. When he saw Joanna, he paused for a moment. "You look different," he said, with the frankness of someone who rarely notices details, but when he does, he doesn't hide his surprise. "I'm wearing lipstick, sir," Joanna answered simply. He nodded, like that explained everything, and continued on to the kitchen. But when he passed her again later, he said something Joanna never expected to hear. "It looks good on you." 3 words, as simple as Sophia's, different in content, but similar in impact. It was the first time Mr. Mendonça truly saw her, not as a function, but as a person. That week was different from any before it. Small changes began to happen. Mrs. Mendonça started saying good morning when Joanna arrived. Mr. Mendonça thanked her when she brought coffee to his office. Sophia continued being Sophia, honest, curious, affectionate. On Friday, while Joanna was organizing the pantry, Mrs. Mendonça came into the kitchen and watched her work for a moment. "Joanna," she finally said, "I've noticed you've been reading books during your lunch break." Joanna felt a knot in her stomach. Was this another talk about knowing your place? "Yes, ma'am. I hope it's not a problem." "No, not at all. I was just curious. What kind of books do you like?" That question caught Joanna off guard. It was the first time Mrs. Mendonça had ever shown any interest in her personal tastes. "I like novels, stories about ordinary people overcoming challenges." Mrs. Mendonça smiled a little, as if that answer surprised her. "I used to love reading too before." "All this," she said, gesturing vaguely as if referring to the house, the work, life in general. "Now I hardly have time." It was a strange moment. A small portal opened between the worlds of these 2 women. For a few seconds they weren't boss and maid. They were just 2 women talking about books and how they had no time to read. "If you'd like, I could lend you some of mine," Joanna offered, surprising even herself with her boldness. Mrs. Mendonça looked equally surprised. For a moment, Joanna feared she'd crossed some invisible line. But then the woman smiled, a genuine smile, different from the polite, distant ones she usually gave. "Maybe someday," she said, before leaving the kitchen. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was a small crack, letting in a little light. That night, in her home, Joanna wrote a different kind of letter to her son. She told him about Sophia and her drawing. She told him about the red lipstick. She wrote about how small words can change the way we see ourselves. "Sometimes, son," she wrote, "it's the little things that save us." "You smell good," said by a child. "That looks good on you," said by someone who never noticed you before. They're like small lights on a dark path. And if you gather enough of those lights, you can see the entire road. The following week, Mrs. Mendonça asked Joanna to come earlier on Wednesday. Sophia had a school presentation, and they needed to be there by 8 a.m. "Can you stay here until we get back? Should be around 10. You can get a head start on the cleaning." "Sure, ma'am. No problem." When the family left, Joanna started her usual routine, but the atmosphere felt different. An empty house has a different energy, a different kind of silence. Joanna turned on the small radio she carried in her bag, something she'd never dared do before, and let the music fill the rooms while she worked. While cleaning the couple's bedroom, Joanna noticed a book on Mrs. Mendonca's bedside table. It was a bestseller she had read months before, borrowed from a neighbor. Without thinking too much, Joanna grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, "If you like this one, I have another by the same author that's even better. Joanna." She left the note next to the book and went on cleaning, feeling a strange mix of fear for having crossed a boundary and hope that maybe, just maybe, it was time to redraw some boundaries. When the family returned, Sophia ran to show Joanna a gold star she'd received at her presentation. Mrs. Mendonca looked tired, but smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. Mr. Mendonca went straight to his office, as usual. The day went on normally. Joanna cleaned, organized, did everything she was supposed to do. In the afternoon, while she was ironing clothes in the service area, Mrs. Mendonca appeared holding the note Joanna had left. "You've read this book?" she asked bluntly. "I have. It's really good." She looked from the note to Joanna. "Which other one did you mention? By the same author?" Joanna smiled, relieved she wasn't in trouble. "The House of Memories. It's about a woman who inherits an old house and discovers hidden letters in the walls. It's beautiful. Sounds interesting. I can bring it next week if you'd like." She hesitated for a moment, as if struggling with something inside, some unwritten rule about keeping distance between boss and employee. But then she nodded. "Thank you, Joanna. I'd like that." It was a small victory, a small form of acknowledgement, a small beam of light. 2 weeks later, she gave the book back with a note. "I loved it. You're right. It's better than the first one. Thanks for letting me borrow it. Helena." Helena. It was the first time Joanna saw her employer's first name written out. In almost 8 months of working there, it had always been Mrs. Mendonca, never Helena. Through that simple note, it was like Mrs. Mendonca was also trying to be more than just a function, more than the boss, trying to be Helena. Time passed, and the small changes continued. Joanna now ate lunch in the kitchen, no longer in the service area. Sophia spent time with her whenever she was home. Mr. Mendonca started greeting her by name in the mornings. Occasionally, Helena asked about books, and they exchanged recommendations. It wasn't a radical transformation. Joanna was still the housekeeper. She still cleaned, still organized, still did her job. But now, she was Joanna who cleaned, not just the cleaning lady. One day, almost a year after she started working for the Mendoncas, Joanna arrived to find Helena in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. "Good morning, ma'am. Is everything all right?" Helena tried to smile but couldn't. "Yes, Joanna, just problems at the store. Nothing you need to worry about." Joanna nodded and began gathering her cleaning supplies. But after a moment, she said something she never imagined saying to her employer. "If you'd like to talk, sometimes it helps to share with someone on the outside." Helena looked at her, surprised. Then, after a long silence, she began to speak about how the store was doing badly, how she felt like a failure, how she was afraid of disappointing her family, things she'd probably never imagined sharing with the housekeeper. Joanna just listened. She offered no advice. She didn't judge. She was just there as a person, not as a function. When Helena finished, she seemed lighter. She looked at Joanna with a different expression, one of gratitude, yes, but also recognition. She was truly seeing the woman in front of her. Thank you for listening, Joanna. Sometimes that's all we need. Someone who listens. Helena smiled, a tired but genuine smile. You're a wise woman. No, Mum, just a woman who's been through a lot. In that moment, they connected, not as boss and employee, as woman to woman, human being to human being. The following week, Helena invited Joanna to have coffee with her in the kitchen before starting work. A small gesture, but meaningful. A recognition that before being the housekeeper, Joanna was a person, with her own interests, her own story, her own dignity. Observing this, Mr. Mendonça also started treating Joanna differently, not as a ghost who cleaned his house, but as a real presence, with a name, a face, and value. Sophia, of course, stayed the same. For her, Joanna was never invisible. Children have that gift of seeing people, not functions. They notice the red lipstick, the pleasant smell, the gentle smile. They don't see the maid, they see Joanna. A year and a half after she started working for the Mendonça family, Joanna was no longer just the housekeeper. She had become part of the fabric of that home. She still cleaned, of course, but she was also Helena's confidant, the one who oversaw Sophia's playtime, and an occasional advisor to Mr. Mendonça in matters he didn't know how to address with his wife. And above all else, she was Joanna, visible, present, with a name, a story, and red lipstick on her lips. One Saturday afternoon, Helena invited Joanna and her son to have lunch in the garden, not as a worker, but as a guest. It felt strange at first. Joanna wasn't used to sitting at the table with her employers, to being served instead of serving. During lunch, Sophia, now 7, said something that made everyone pause. You know Joanna saved our family? The adults looked at each other in surprise. What do you mean, honey? Helena asked. Before Joanna wore red lipstick, you two fought a lot. And you wouldn't talk to me. And Daddy was always in his office. After she started looking pretty and smelling nice, you got happier. That childlike observation, so simple and direct, fell like a revelation over the table. Helena looked at Joanna, then at her husband, then at her daughter. I think you're right, Sophia, she finally said. Sometimes we need someone to remind us how to be people, not just functions. Joanna felt tears well up in her eyes. Those weren't words she'd ever expected to hear. Not words a woman like her, a housekeeper, a simple woman from the suburbs, would expect to hear from someone like Helena, a store owner, an executive's wife, a woman of a higher social class. But there they were, words that recognized not only her existence, but her impact. Words that said, you matter, you made a difference, you have been seen. That night, back in her apartment, now full of life since her son had come to live with her, Joanna looked in the mirror. She saw her red lipstick, a bit faded after a long day. She saw small wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She saw strands of grey in her hair. But most importantly, she saw Joanna. Not the maid, not the cleaning lady, not the housekeeper. She saw a woman who, even when the world tried to erase her, found the courage to be visible. A woman who, inspired by a child's simple words, "You smell nice," decided to exist fully in all her colors and all her fragrances. A woman who, in a way, had saved herself too. Because when it comes down to it, that's who we are. Not just functions, jobs, or social roles. We are people. Complex, imperfect, valuable. We deserve to be seen, to be appreciated, to wear red lipstick if we want to. We deserve to come home with a little dignity at the end of the day. We all deserve to be more than transparent. We deserve to be present. As Joanna learned, sometimes the greatest acknowledgements come from the simplest words. Sometimes, all it takes is a child saying, "You smell nice," to remind us that we exist beyond the jobs we do. And maybe that's the real power of words. Not just to communicate, but to transform. Not just to describe the world, but to recreate it. A world where housekeepers are Joannas, where people are people first and function second. A world where we are all seen, we are all heard, we all smell nice. Have you ever felt that way? Like nobody even remembers your name? Leave a comment below. Someone out there will understand you. If this touched you, take a deep breath. Sometimes the pain you feel has a name, and that name is unimportance. If you've ever been treated like a burden, leave a like, just to say, "I know that feeling too." If this part made you breathe differently, share this video with someone who might need to be seen. If you know someone who deserves to be remembered as a person, not just a service, send them this video with care. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe here. Every week we share real stories like this, about everyday people, living pains no one notices, and finding strength in details almost no one pays attention to. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time someone truly saw you?